speaking of the speakership race, yes, I do have Joseph Othieno and Mr. Mike Sebalu, the former Yala MP, to actually expound more on this. Was it wishful thinking for the opposition to come out and say maybe the NRM MPs would vote the other way and KADAGA would still be speaker? What do you make of all this, Mike Sebalu? Opposition, did they miss an opportunity yesterday to galvanize forces against the NRM, or was it simply wishful thinking?
Yeah, I would say it was simply wishful thinking. There are two issues that I want to bring on the fore. To begin with, I think Right Honorable Alitwala KADAGA, whom I respect, but failed it on the sense of judgment. I think she overrated herself.
Indeed.
And if she didn't overrate herself, then she underrated the party.
Indeed.
Because the decision she took was to engage the party. A party position, going counter to a party position, unless the party is very highly disorganized, you simply cannot go around it and think that you can carry the day, in my humble opinion. So that was underrating the party structure, the party leadership, and the party coordination.
Many political experts contend that this was geared towards showing that the NRM party is really, really strong. There was consensus. You had this Central Executive Committee coming in on Saturday and they were saying we are backing Oulanya. The NRM Parliamentary Caucus approves on Sunday, and then we saw them vote that way on Monday. So the wishful thinking part we are talking about is when opposition comes out and says, well, we've seen SEC back this particular candidate, but we expect them to rebel at the end of the day and vote for Rebecca KADAGA.
Yeah, maybe they got this kind of thinking that the NRM MPs would go against the position of the party, which is wishful thinking in my view, because at the end of the day, those are members of the party, those are the beneficiaries of the party arrangements, and the same arrangement favored Right Honorable KADAGA 5 years ago. To expect that this time round it wouldn't work again is fertile imagination.
Maybe the viewer is wondering what is Sebalu talking about, the SEC position. Explain to them 5 years ago what SEC.
No, 5 years ago, again, the two candidates really were interested in the top office of Speaker, and the SEC prevailed over Jacob Oulanya to let Right Honorable KADAGA finish her term to make it 10 like had been offered to Vice President who was Speaker for 10 years.
Edward II.
And the understanding was that after 10 years, then you'll have an opportunity to take leadership. So it is kind of a practice that the party has developed in terms of determining who takes the chair of speakership. So having had the same arrangement 5 years ago, and the contender then appreciated and respected the outcome and the decision of SEC, it would automatically be understood and appreciated that a similar arrangement would be relevant for this time round, and going against it may not have been the best thing to do at the time. So and for the opposition to ride on that and imagine that they can pull rugs below the feet of NRM was indeed something that could not work out.
You are telling me that some opposition MPs voted for Rebecca KADAGA in that regard?
Yeah,
they won 97 votes.
They did, because when you do the mathematics, when you get 310, and then you look at opposition, you look at independent, you'll find that Rebecca KADAGA got majority of the opposition votes.
197.
Because when you go to the candidate that came out of opposition for that office, Ibrahim Semujung and Honorable, only getting 15 votes, yet his party has 34 members in parliament, NUP has 57 members, DP has about 8, and UPC. So when you add up, Semuju having got 10, 15, can only be explained that the rest of the opposition votes went to, they could not have gone to Oulanya. I would be surprised if there was some that went to Oulanya. So chances are that majority of those votes went to Right Honorable Alitwala KADAGA.
Joseph Othieno, political experts contend that what we saw yesterday actually depicts party cohesion, that the NRM party is actually very united. They came up with a consensus on Saturday to back a particular candidate. There was an approval on Sunday, and the elections really showed that the consensus was really being followed by the book. But what we didn't see was opposition galvanizing forces, a united front to take on any of the NRM candidate being backed by SEC. Do you think that was the main reason why they lost, even though NRM has the majority numbers, and even though they had to, add those numbers, they couldn't trust the NRM?
I take a slightly different view, but quite closely. But yeah, congratulations to my rather robust brother, Jacob, and indeed Anita, who seems to have risen rather swiftly and under the circumstances. But they need to know that looking back to where Rebecca was, possibly 10 or so years ago, they don't need to clap so much. This is...
anything can happen.
In a way, yes, but they have an advantage of time. And the time is the timing, really, that this is a battle for succession in NRM. The position of speaker is very strategic. That's my opinion, is very strategic. Who becomes the next who, when Museveni gets rather tired, in my opinion, number one, on the one hand. And so people will be clamoring for that. And I believe that the conversation is really beyond the party line conversation that we're possibly focusing on. But on the other also is the fact that Mr. Museveni was a Mr. Chessmaster at the back of it, who therefore should be who on this one. While the organization NRM went as presented yesterday united, the whole thing has been shambles the last several weeks. So they're really not necessarily a very united organization. The advantage they have is that they've got the chairman, as Museveni would call himself, of the organization. He has everything. He's got State House. This guy's even went ahead and met in State House, which ideally should not be the place for political party organizations to meet. He said it yesterday, that he had to whip these guys, including making phone calls. Now, so on the one hand, so therefore, they've got the leadership, that instructs and uses every means, including state resources, to deliver for them. On the opposition, there's really no leadership. There was no leadership. And yes, shockingly, I would have expected my good brother Robert Chagulanyi to have made a slightly much more organized presence and to articulate his position and to articulate the key position on behalf of the main democratic opposition, and they did not. Now, where we possibly blame them in terms of numbers, my view is this, that it was very unlikely that the opposition could impossibly not win.
Could that be the reason why Robert Chagulanyi decided to be silent?
No, not at all. If I were leader of opposition, I would take one or two approaches. One, you either decide to mobilize all the opposition and take a position and demand that the NRM guys should wake up and see the quality in you, and after all, speakership, and include deputy speakership, does not necessarily have to go to the governing political party, especially if you claim you want a much more cohesive National Assembly after a very, very crude election, which so many people dying. So a healing process in Parliament, you could easily have taken a route and blackmail the NRM guys. But on the other, there's really nothing particularly...
Do you think the presence of Robert Chagulanyi would have actually had an effect? I mean, we are talking about 87 independents, 57 MPs on the NUP side, over 35 for the FDC. Putting them together, do you think they would have come out with the numbers?
If they were experienced strategic parliamentarians, there's no reason why you don't blackmail the breakup of the NRM. There is absolutely no reason. But you have to make a sensible argument to that effect.
Blackmailing NRM is not something that may work, unfortunately.
In the absence of Mr. Museveni, it could have worked.
Okay, in the absence of President Museveni, let him exhaust that. I want to hear it.
In the absence of Mr. Museveni, it could have worked. My point really here is...
Meaning if the chairman wasn't there yesterday, it could have been different.
Indeed, and Ugandans need to know this, because I've been making this argument for a long time. A parliamentary speaker does not necessarily need to come from the governing political party. The parliamentary speaker, number one. Number two, the speaker does not necessarily have to be whipped. Members don't have to be whipped. This is basically a prefect of an assembly, where legislators, new and old, come in and simply say, who amongst us is going to be the arbitrator, the moderator, and the person who's going to help us interpret the rules so that the game is played inside. So it can really come from any political party and organization. So really, genuinely, you could easily say between Oulanya and Rebecca, by and large, two of them for different reasons, as suggested. You know, you look for maybe the third person, really. You know, if you want to go look at detail, there's no reason why you can't pick one of them and go with them and simply say we're going to back this, but for this particular individual, for strategic reason, to break NRM.
It seems like Mr. Sebalu wants to make a submission
no.
there.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I think blackmail cannot work with NRM. The numbers are there, but that is not the most important thing. I think opposition simply lacked leadership.
No, fair enough. Yeah.
If opposition had leadership, they should have had a joint meeting where then they do a short list from amongst our numbers. Who is the most credible from the opposition side, so that we all go and back that candidate. Nothing like that happened.
But I think they were also waiting for you as the NRM to back your particular candidate.
But that is the problem. If they had come out and gotten their candidate and packaged him and started selling him around so that people get to appreciate. That is one view. Then another one, I really appreciate the viewpoint of Othieno, that note if the speaker comes from NRM, it doesn't necessarily mean for accommodation, the possibility of accommodating another person as deputy can be explored, but it can only be explored when you present it. When you
I don't agree. That's my
it.
point. That's my point.
Like yesterday, the president made it clear that we need to talk, and I want to talk. Now that can be a good point upon which you negotiate and say, really, for the good of the country, can you present a candidate for the speakership, and for accommodation and good practice, can you also explore a possibility where the opposition can also present someone to serve as deputy? That is something that can be negotiated if you create willingness and if you create a sense of national interest to play ball. But this whole idea of being opposition in all aspects doesn't work, because this is the time when now you negotiate. This is the time when you lobby.
Mr. Othieno also talked about the influence of the executive. President Museveni being there, his presence yesterday, he says, intimidated some of the MPs.
Not quite. I think the president had made his case when he met the team. One thing you need to appreciate is that President Museveni never underestimates any engagement.
Which makes my point.
And that is a good leader. A good leader should not take anything for granted. You need to follow through and deliver on results. Now, yesterday you could see that the opposition just believed that by supporting one candidate, that candidate can win. They didn't even make any effort to follow through and engage. But for me, I would rather present a candidate from within my political persuasion as opposition, even if they lose, but they lose with substantial support from within opposition. I think that is a better statement.
Because
yesterday what happened is that yesterday opposition supported individuals who happened to be in NRM. For whatever reasons they did. They never supported.
415,
yes.
197 for KADAGA.
Yes.
You believe some opposition people voted for
Some opposition people voted for her,
instead
definitely.
of Ibrahim Semujunganda,
Instead of Ibrahim, because you can't explain Ibrahim getting 15, where opposition is almost 100 in terms of numbers.
No consensus.
So where did they go? And they all voted. It's on record. They voted. So when you see 15, that means that the vote never went to a candidate who professes what they profess.
Joseph Othieno, where did opposition lose the ball? Looking at Jacob Oulanyah as an individual, because if you look at Jacob Oulanyah as an individual, you'd have chances of say Jacob is hated by many of the MPs at Parliament. Maybe they'll vote the other way for Rebecca KADAGA. Those were some of the analyses I was hearing from many people. They were saying he's hated at Parliament. Because of his bullish behavior. Let me finish. Because of his bullish behavior, and that's why they were saying maybe that's why MPs would go for Rebecca KADAGA. So they were focusing on Jacob Oulanyah as an institution, not knowing he's being backed by the SEC or the whole NRM party. Is that where they dropped the ball?
He was not an individual candidate. He was a party candidate.
Indeed, he was a party candidate. Is that where they dropped the ball as opposition?
No, I think, as I said before, we can't really have it both ways. But just to make the point, if we say that the opposition knew that they didn't have the numbers, for speaker, there is no reason why we cannot explain that some of them really simply had to align with whoever or the leading candidates were on this occasion. I'm sure many of them actually went for Rebecca KADAGA, including, I know, a number of opposition legislators who voted for Jacob Oulanyah for different reasons. This thing brought in a bit of identity questions, regional strategic kind of things, and geopolitics and NRM. I know my colleague here may take a slightly different view, but
I agree with that.
Actually see, including one of the reasons why NRM guys would back Oulanyah, in many cases possibly even beyond the succession question. But right now, the NRM wants the North, needs the North and the Greater East. They needed to be able to present these. Rebecca has been penetrating part of Busoga when it comes to recent elections. I saw a senior advisor of Mr. Museveni putting in the figures of what Rebecca Kadaga got and the fact that in her constituency, Kyagulanyi beat Museveni there. So you get some of these nuances, and they by and large make sense. I know a number of people who voted for Jacob, but for very, very different reasons, including taking into account the fact that they possibly know that between the two of them in the assembly, perhaps Rebecca might be a better person. Now, the other thing is about personality politics. Human beings, voters really don't like rather ambitious individuals. Both Jacob and Rebecca are. Jacob, if anything, is much more robust, much more younger, much more going for it, from that point of view. So he would even possibly be a turnoff. But on the other hand, presentationally, is rather young. There's a good case made for him that 5 years ago he had been promised to wait. So that counts on it. And then finally, many of the legislators who are coming on board are relatively new. This thing is happening pre-cabinet. I know, again, I met a number of NRM guys last week who were waiting for instructions to follow. Quite clearly, quietly between themselves, they would rather actually go for Rebecca Kadaga, but they're going to go for Jacob Oulanyah. My point still is this. My opinion, this was a wasted opportunity for both, in my opinion, both from NRM and the opposition. It was really an opportunity for Mr. Museveni to say, let's leave it to legislators, talk quietly to legislators, say, vote for an NRM candidate, but let this guys go ahead and determine. The assembly was going to be much
Isn't
more.
that what we saw, Mr. Joseph Othieno?
No,
It
was instruction from SEC, which shouldn't have happened, and it was instruction up to the tent in Colombo.
You really believe the Central Executive Committee shouldn't be involved in the processes of appointing a speaker?
The Speaker of Parliament, by the way, the Speaker of Parliament is going to lead an assembly, which is actually going to be an counter, to the other arm of government. They shouldn't really be. They shouldn't really be.
But
Mike Sebalu.
I think my brother is being very hypothetical.
Enlighten
We are
him.
talking about practical politics.
Enlighten him.
The party, NRM as a party, is the one that won mandate to lead this country. So it must have interest in who presides over parliament.
Through the legislators.
But the legislators are NRM, the ones they were talking about. So you guide them.
Go ahead, Sebalu.
And as a leader, you guide because you need to know how it ends. So you need to have interest in who is going to preside over the House, because all the items within the manifesto have to be implemented, supported by budget, supported by laws, which are enacted by Parliament. So it becomes of interest for you to follow up in terms of who is going to preside over the same. And there is a practice that has been applied all along. It is tested. That is how it has always been done. I'm wondering why people are taking exception this time round when the same arrangement has always been followed in arriving at who becomes Speaker. It was the same for Sekandi, same for Kadaga, and it has applied for
There were no
Oulanyah.
arguments back then. That's your biggest
No,
contention.
the only difference is that the people participating the same respected the views of SEC, just like Oulanyah did. If Oulanyah had not accepted, maybe a similar situation would have appeared then. But Oulanyah, despite the fact he was interested, he felt he could go it his way, but he was patient enough, listened,
To the
and
organ.
the more reason, actually, that he needed to be rewarded for that, because he had similar good arguments then, and he really wanted to go for it. But he appreciated the wisdom of SEC, and I think SEC felt duty-bound to really live up to the commitment they made then. So what happens now? For me, I find it as a win-win situation. Kadaga won because she wanted to be on the ballot, and she was. So in as far as that is concerned, she won. She got her way to the ballot. But the NRM won because it wanted to present a speaker for the parliament. And indeed, the candidate that NRM presented became the speaker. So I take it as a win-win situation from different perspectives.
Joseph Othieno, of course, if you talk to many of the political experts, they will contend that having an NRM speaker would mean that the NRM party would be implementing its manifesto through Parliament without any hurdles. Is it right to use Parliament as an avenue through which to implement the manifesto of a particular party?
No, and that's actually where the argument is. And part of the problem is this. You know, I come from a point of view of appreciating democracy globally. Number two, appreciating the reality of democracy, including in this country. But many other observers will be excited about the recent quote, democracy in NRM, which is basically an attempted democracy process. So some of my conversation is basically an opportunity for some of the people, including new legislators, some of whom possibly may not necessarily even have an idea what their job is going to be or what should real identity be in the next assembly. So it's basically about helping part of what the democratic process should really be all about. And so therefore you're absolutely right. As I said, Parliament is one of the three arms of government. You know, Parliament should be independent. What has already been signaled, while I totally agree that Jacob sort of deserves this, and I disagree that maybe 5 years ago he had much more of the strength. He possibly did not. Maybe Rebecca would have beaten him if you played it the other way around. But no, he's got the opportunity. But back to your question, where are we? I think Parliament, quote, lost an opportunity. As I said, Parliament as an assembly should be an open room for which the class teacher or the head teacher of the school does not participate in the selection or election of a class prefect. And the class prefect is usually elected, and I was lucky, I was elected on my day one in Nagongara Primary School when I started primary one. We assembled like this, and the young guys look at you and say, you know, maybe they don't know you, but they look at your body language. Yeah, I think this so-and-so is going to be a likely a bit, somebody who will write my name if I get cheeky and then I get a bit of a whip from the teachers. But no, I think it's generally a fair person who can represent our cause. So that's what this assembly is all about.
Oulanyah is speaker now. And just what will Parliament be like under his tenure or leadership?
I think he's a fairly strong guy. He's a fairly strong guy. He's possibly actually much more instructive than Rebecca. And possibly in terms of clarity, he's more likely to be much
quality
more
of debate. He's pushing for that.
I must actually say that including that, he may possibly do actually slightly better. The worries from other observers, not me, other observers, is that possibly he's going to be too much of a yes guy, you know, taking instructions from State House, considering the fact that both he and KADAGA, age limit, you know, term limit, some of these very controversial legislative decisions were made under their watch, and possibly with them acquiescing. The head of Parliament, a speaker, should not be a yes person for the executive. And by the way, they don't necessarily have to come from the political position. That is why, again, in democracies, which Uganda must learn, and Uganda is really not a democracy. Uganda is struggling in there, and I hope possibly democracy will emerge beyond MUSEVENI. That's my view. In a democracy, legislators will look across the House and say, who is the most mature person? Who is the most sensible person? Before they started feeling like wanting to become deputy speakers, when we used to meet in parliamentary committees, do they ignore us or not? Are they fair in the debates and conversations or not? Even in the tea rooms, are they people who can work across political divides and things like that? Consensus builders. Those are the people who emerge as respectable individuals in political parties and organizations. And that's what I'm saying, I repeat, it is actually possible that a Speaker of Parliament in a future Parliament of Uganda, possibly when UPC is there, can come from any political party or organization, so long as they present a sense of maturity, ability to moderate, ability to play fair, ability to help interpret, and ability to help guide the flock, so that the flock can become an arm of government that checks the executive, checks the judiciary, checks you guys, the fourth estate, and ensures that legislators deliver for what they should be, meaning legislation and delivering services for the people of our country. Mike
Sebalu, you wanted to make a submission on that.
Yeah, I think I continue insisting because I know different jurisdictions. Like before in Kenya, a speaker would not necessarily be a member of parliament. They would get from outside people who are qualified and bring. There are jurisdictions where they've deliberately agreed that speakers should come from the smallest parties. and they always do it wrong like that.
But in
all cases, the parties are involved. Just to just to look at a situation where you let MPs who've not known each other and within a day or two to see how mature the other one is and how practical is that? Like now, they just came in, were sworn the other day. What time frame do they have to look around and be able to, with certainty and with precision, come up with a good leader? So there is no way you can isolate the parties from, even where you have such arrangement, it must be guided by the party. Because we are going to have a leader of opposition. Is the leader of, and the leader of opposition is not in the House. Is the leader of opposition going to allow members from among themselves to look at who is more mature to be leader of opposition? Still, the leader of opposition has to come in and offer leadership. So there is no way you can run away from leadership. And leadership comes from the party to guide Parliament. But in execution of its mandate, Parliament should play its role the way it is defined, representation, oversight, legislation and appropriation. But there is no way in a multi-party dispensation you can run away from that. Because even in cases where you find that the president has won, but he has a minority in Parliament, because that possibility is there, where the president wins, but in Parliament he has a minority. You'll find that they will go into alliances to be able to build momentum and the numerical strength in order to offer the speaker in a negotiated way. So my disagreement with my brother is that you cannot run away from guiding the process from the viewpoint of leadership of party.
And his disagreement and other opposition members, they claim that, you know what, it's one thing to have a speaker, but if that speaker is partisan or allied to the NRM party, they wouldn't be able to front national interests, but rather party positions. Don't you agree with that?
No, I think there are two things. Belonging to a party does not make you partisan in the execution of your... You can stand over and above and be able to pursue your agenda from the perspective of national interest. And like any other person can do. Because I don't want us to limit that to Honorable KADAGA, that she's the only one who can do that. Everyone needs an opportunity. And I don't want us to be unfair to Oulanya, judging him in the perspective of the time when he was not in charge. He was not the speaker. Now that
we need to appraise him
now
after
that he's
this
the
5-year
speaker, look at his performance from his viewpoint when he's presiding over the institution. If you followed his speech, he put very important issues and he indicated that he is going to be a fair speaker and is going to uphold the interests of the nation.
And of course,
so let's allow him his space, his time, and let's give him the support so that he executes his mandate.
And that was a fantastic
Judging him behind, on the basis of previous term where he was not in charge would be really unfair on his
And of course, congratulations to Jacob OULANYAH'S, the Speaker of the 11th Parliament. We shall appraise your work after the end of your tenure or as you proceed to execute your duties. The conversation has largely come to an end, but then there's also another conversation on what is happening in UPC. My brother here, Joseph Othieno, is contentious and he says that, you know what, Peter Waluwidi shouldn't be the UPC president or Jimmy Akena. There is a court case on July 14th? 14th. Yes, acquaint us in a minute.
Yes, no, as you know, the Court of Appeal ruled last year that September, in fact, that Jimmy had not been elected leader of the party, so the party should hold fresh elections. Waluwidi was holding the staff following the death of Joseph Bosa. Elections took place in December. I believe I won those elections, and I sought to have a conversation with the speakers. It didn't work, and as a result, I decided to take them to court.
Which is July 14th.
Which is July 14th.
All right.
Very unfortunate.
Thank
so
you very
technically
much.
we don't have a leader at the moment, but you know, the results are quite
There's no leader right now
yeah,
within the UPC until the July 14th court case. Joseph Othieno, thank you very much for coming through. Mr. Mike Sebalu, thank you very much for having made the time to speak to us. Thank you. All right, you're still watching Morning at NTV. We have a coronavirus pandemic on our hands. Please wear a face mask before you leave your home. And also the kings, queens, boys and girls, including myself, who are celebrating their birthdays, please enjoy a joyous birthday. But please be cognizant of the fact that COVID-19 is still here. 43,919 cases of COVID-19, 167.2 million on the global stage. Have yourselves a blessed morning.